Mr. Chair, we're now live.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Start off, due to the COVID-19 emergency and requirements for physical distancing, in-person attendance is not permitted at this meeting of council. This meeting will be live streamed for viewing at ajax.ca/live. Electronic participation is permitted pursuant to council's procedural bylaw, but I don't think that's the correct stuff I'm supposed to read, is it, Mr. Clerk?
That's fine, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, that'll cover it. Good. I'll call this meeting to order. We'll start with the land acknowledgement. I'd like to begin this meeting by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is situated within the traditional and treaty territories of the Mississaugas, more specifically the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, signatories of the Gunshot Treaty of 1788 and the Williams Treaties of 1923. This land is and will continue to be home to the Indigenous peoples. Let us acknowledge the mistakes and traumas of the past through authenticity and support truth and reconciliation. Let us engage and celebrate Indigenous communities by being leaders of action and acknowledging the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's recommendations towards truth and reconciliation. Let us keep these principles close as we continue towards truth and reconciliation and as we move forward with kindness and respect as a community. Does any member of council have a pecuniary interest on items on tonight's agenda? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Clerk, I don't see a question period. Were there any questions posed from the public?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there's no question period associated with this special meeting of council.
Perfect, thank you. Moving on to reports, item 3.1, departmental reports, Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program. It says Mr. Baker, but it might be Ms. Cruciano giving this presentation. Please go ahead when you're ready.
Wonderful. Thank you, Council. Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So there is a report that's in front of you, but what we're going to go through for this meeting is just a short presentation, a short PowerPoint that just kind of at a very high level walks us through the report, just for a little bit of visual aid, because there's quite a bit of information that I've tried to summarize as much as possible. So if we look here, so the first is the COVID-19 Resiliency Fund. So this is a stream of the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, which some of you may be familiar with, or you all should be after our past applications to the Community Culture and Recreation stream. This is a specific fund that's been carved out to support infrastructure and capital projects across the broader public sector to support COVID-19 recovery and resiliency. So this is a $1.05 billion fund announced back in October by both the province and the federal government. But what they've done, and the fund itself does cover things like public health, it covers schools, hospitals, all the other pieces of the broader public sector. But they have carved out $250 million specifically for municipalities. It's called the local government substream. So of what the government did for this substream is they actually took every municipality, all 444 of them, and they used a metric and they looked at the municipal populations, they looked at the value of infrastructure as the province understands it, our median household income, and they provided each municipality with an allocation. And that allocation for the town is $746,614. So what that means is we have the ability to apply for projects, for grants, up to that maximum amount. That maximum amount is fully funded by both the province and the federal government. So sometimes with a lot of grant applications, there's a requirement for municipalities to have some skin in the game to put some dollars forward. So common ones are the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. But in this case, the federal government is picking up 80% of the tab and the province is picking up 20% of it. So there's whatever projects we put forward, we do not have to provide a financial contribution. The other purpose of this project, and because of the design of the program, all projects that we put forward have to be started. They can be started as soon as we're approved, but they have to start by the end of September of 2021 of this year, but they must be completed by December 31st, 2021. And the government has kind of made it clear that they really don't want to be looking at any extensions beyond this point in time. So they've really prioritized projects that are turnkey, that are low risk in terms of timeline extensions, anything like or over budget. So they're really looking for these low risk projects that can be completed within this calendar year. And because our allocation is of more than $500,000, we're eligible to submit up to 5 projects. And the deadline for this is tomorrow at 5 p.m. So are there any questions on sort of at that point there, just on the project, on the program more generally? No? Okay, perfect.
Nope.
So next we have the project eligibility. So this is kind of the 4 key areas that the province has determined they'd like our projects to fall into. So one is a very broad category with retrofits, repairs, and upgrades for municipal buildings. So this includes everything that anything that includes a construction type project for a municipal building asset. We have COVID-19 response infrastructure, which is if you're building things to support physical distancing, HVAC upgrades, those kinds of things. Active transportation infrastructure, which, as you know, includes parks and trails, bridges, etc. And then disaster mitigation and adaptation, which includes any sort of flood and fire mitigation, natural infrastructure, tree planting, that sort of thing. So what our team did here is a combined effort from the Public and Strategic Affairs team in the CAO's office and the broader senior management team. And we looked really closely at our draft 2021 capital budget that will be presented to council in the next month or so, our kind of internal departmental priorities and pressures that each of the departments were facing, as well as taking a really close look at our strategic plan. And then from there compiled a list of potential projects and then looked at those against the program guidelines. So looking at, is it an eligible project category and asset type? Is it, that low risk from a timeline or budget perspective? And does it meet the desired outcomes of the provincial and federal governments? Because this is a project or a program that, because we're being given the allocation up front, we really wanted to select projects that we had a very strong feeling that they would be successful. So these would be strong candidates for this project because of the urgency the governments are putting forward in this, which is deadline January. They're looking to make these decisions sometime in early March, is my understanding, with the anticipation of getting shovels in the ground for spring and completed by end of year. So taking all of that into consideration, the team staff have put together a list of 5 projects that we'll be proceeding with applying for this fund with. So if there's no questions, I'll walk through sort of each of the 5 projects that we're looking to move forward with. And then we can, if there's any questions on each specific project between myself and the relevant department head, we can seek to answer any questions that council may have.
Okay, Cassandra, let's get through the presentation. We'll go to questions at the end.
Perfect. Thank you, Chair. So the first project for submission is the Council Chambers AV and Interior Upgrade. So this would be a project that includes all of the things that are listed here in the project summary. So new audio technology, video capture, live streaming, new lighting system. And the rationale behind this was obviously it qualifies under the retrofit, repairs, and upgrades category, but as well as the COVID-19 response infrastructure to permit the remote, the continuing of remote meetings and engagement tools that council has been doing over the course of COVID. It aligns with our strategic plan action, and it would alleviate a substantial pressure in the 2021 budget. So the grant request for this project in particular is $335,000, which represents the total project amount. And I've put a little note here, and you'll see in the actual, in the report itself, it goes into what happens if these projects are not selected for grant funding. So in this case, the Council Chambers project would proceed in 2021 with building maintenance funding pending budget approval by council in February. The second project is a wetland restoration project at the northeast corner of Kingston Road and Salem Road. So this would be work with to be completed by the TRCA in a town-owned priority area of the Carruthers of a priority area in the Carruthers watershed plan. And obviously, this would qualify under the disaster mitigation and adaptation category, supports our strategic plan action related to mitigating downstream flooding risks in the Carruthers Creek watershed. And the other piece of this is that the region of Durham notified us that out of their allocation that they've received under this program, because the upper tiers were assigned funds the same way that the lower tiers were, the region has taken $500,000 of their allocation and will be using it to support this project. So we would be coming to the table with $250,000 for a total project cost of $750,000. So this is a currently unbudgeted project and not something that was planned prior to this. So in the event that it is not successful for grant funding, staff would recommend that it's deferred to a later point when other funding sources became available. The third project is the design and repair of the Transcanada Trail washout at Church Street in the 401. So this is to design and do the construction of the washed out trail and its location, but as well as to put in some additional stabilization treatments to ensure the ongoing sustainability of that trail section. So this would qualify under the active transportation category. It was considered to be sort of a turnkey project that already has a scope defined, and through our existing engagement with the TRCA, it supports multiple strategic plan goals and actions and is currently unbudgeted. So the grant request for this project would be $123,000, which from this perspective so it's $123,000. If it's not selected for grant funding, the recommendation from staff would be that it proceed in 2021 with general infrastructure funding. Project number 4, this is some active transportation infrastructure in North and Central Ajax. So over the summer of 2020, staff worked on designing and implementing active TOA routes, primarily in South Ajax, which you would recall include the sort of markings on the trails of the Trillium or the other markings on the trails networks. So this is looking to expand those active TOA routes into North and Central Ajax, as well as purchase 2 additional bike repair stations. So this would qualify under the active transportation category again, supports our broader strategic plan goals related to active transportation, and staff feel that it's a low budget but high impact project with substantial community benefit, just based on the popularity and positive feedback that was received as a result of the existing routes that were in use last summer. So this grant request is for $25,000 and is currently an unbudgeted project. And therefore, because it's unbudgeted, the recommendation from staff that if it's not successful or is not selected for grant funding, that we would defer to a later point in time. And then the last project that we are proposing to apply for would be the purchase of hazmat equipment for fire and emergency services. So this would support AFES's progress from hazmat awareness response level to mission-specific hazmat rescue and response. So under the COVID-19 response infrastructure category, there is a section that includes support for projects that increase the safety and resiliency for first responders. This is in line with the requirements of the National Fire Protection Association. But what we've done here, because the previous 4 projects totaled 700 and I believe it was 710 or 730,000, any surplus. So the total project cost for the hazmat equipment is $90,000, and that's what's included in the 2021 draft capital budget. But we're looking to request sort of the balance of what's left over of our allocation, which would be $13,614 for this project. And with that, we're able to, in the event that any of the other 4 projects come in under budget and we have surplus funds, this project has been selected in such a way that any surplus funds from the other projects could be allocated here to offset or to increase that amount applied towards the $90,000. And so based on that, if it's not selected for grant funding, the recommendation from staff at this time would be to proceed in 2021 for the full $90,000 project amount with development funding pending budget approval. And that concludes my presentation in terms of the 5 projects that our staff are looking to apply for.
Thank you, Madam Chair, or thank you, sorry, what am I thinking? Ms. Cruciano, just before we go to questions, Mr. Clerk, I have to do a motion to reconsider. Would it be better for me to do that now and bring the resolution forward before questions, or after the questions when we're going to deal with the recommendations?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it would be more appropriate to do the reconsideration motion now so that the resolution and the discussion is in order.
Okay, so I was thinking. So I have, before we go to questions, motion to reconsider, moved by Councillor Crawford, second by Councillor Tyler Morin, that council reconsider the resolution regarding the bridge number 1003 rehabilitation / bank stabilization project scope change and Transcanada Trail, Church Street and Highway 401 contract award, last considered at its meeting of December 14th, 2020. Since this is a reconsideration, it does require 2/3. Those in favor of reconsideration, please, I'll need to see all hands. Okay, I see 6. None opposed, that carries unanimously. And then we have the actual resolution on departmental report 3.1.1, investing in Canada infrastructure program grant, moved by Councillor Lee, second by Councillor Khan. 1, that council received the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program report for information. 2, that council award the contract for detailed design and repair of the trail section to TRCA in the amount of $103,449.07. 3, that if the town is successful in its application with the ICIP Resilience Infrastructure Grants, the funds previously allocated be returned to the General Infrastructure Reserve, and 4, that staff be directed to explore long-term opportunities for the expansion and/or redevelopment of the trail network in the area adjacent to the existing Transcanada Trail, which we discussed last time. So questions, please. Just who I see first, Councillor Lee and Councillor Tyler Morin.
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair to staff, this is in regards to the council chambers AV and interior upgrades. I think, if anything, this past year has shown that it's really much needed to have these upgrades so that we can broadcast these council meetings, every single one. So my question is in regards to our contract with Rogers right now. So are we currently paying Rogers to broadcast our council meetings 4 times a year?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I can take that question. So we do not have a monetary arrangement with Rogers. We do have a contract agreement with them that dates back to about 2005, I believe, when the previous council chambers AV system was installed. The contract that we have with them simply gives them access to the space to use the technology that they've installed for the purposes of broadcasting Ajax council meetings through the Rogers Television local network station. It does not have any monetary implications for the town. And if this project were to go ahead through grant application funding, we would be in contact with Rogers to determine the future of their local broadcasts. I can tell you that they have picked up several of our electronic live stream meetings and broadcast those on Rogers Television as well. So it's quite possible for them to simply continue doing exactly that once we return to in-person meetings.
Have they been broadcasting it live as well, or is it after the fact?
I believe it's live.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure. I mean, we ultimately could have seen some cost savings if there was a monetary component to that agreement, because quite frankly, I don't think we may not need it anymore if now we can just upload it to YouTube or whatever. But I suppose there is a contingent that watch the actual council chambers via Rogers, so I'm glad they're doing it. So that's my only question. Like I said, I'm fully supportive of this. I think we did a version of this last year where we questioned it, but I think now more than ever, we don't know what the next 9 months to a year is going to look like for council. And so if we can get these changes done, we'll be kind of future-proofing ourselves for future council. So that's my only question. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Tyler Morin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So procedurally, my question is to Cassandra. Mr. Cristiano, when let's say the wetlands, does the grant funding come to the region, but if it doesn't come to the town, like, does it have to be both or vice versa? Does that just happen anyway? Or is the grant funding contingent on being at both levels of government in order for the project to happen?
Ms.
Through
Buchanan?
Through the chair, my understanding is that the project itself, the scope of the wetland restoration is really whatever the budget dictates that it will be. So if the region receives $500,000, but we don't receive $250,000 for our element of the project, the project would proceed with a $500,000 budget. One is not necessarily contingent upon the other. So if the region was not successful, but we were, the work that we put into the restoration would be a $250,000 budget. Does that
Okay.
answer?
Yeah, yeah. I just wanted to know if something, like it wouldn't happen because, oh, we didn't receive funding from the region, let's say, as well. But you're saying that, yeah, we could do it independently, or they could do it independently, or we could do it together. All three scenarios are in the yeah scenarios here.
Through the chair, that's correct.
Thank you so much, and thanks for your work on this.
Okay, Councillor Bauer?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you for this report and all the work that went into it. Couple of questions. So I just want to understand. So I think, Cass, you said that there was a calculation performed for each municipality to determine the amount that would be allocated to them to apply for funding. Is
Through
that right?
Through the chair to Councillor Bauer, yes, that's correct. The province assessed each municipality based on their own framework to give us a dollar figure, to assign a dollar figure to us.
Okay. So then why would they, if they are allocating a certain amount of money to us, then why would they not approve all of our applications that add up to that total?
Through the chair, that's a great question. I think the rationale for this program in particular, and looking at the program guidelines, it is intended to be as open and broad as possible to ensure that pretty much whatever is submitted will be successful. Because I think, from my understanding, this amount of money has been assigned to say spend up to this amount, and for us, the project categories are exceptionally broad, and the asset types and projects that you can put money into, the pages of the appendices that were provided by the province are vast, and so with that information it would be quite surprising if any of the projects were denied, especially the ones that we've selected. However, through my experience working with the province and the federal government, and just the fact that this amount has been carved out for us, in the event that we are unsuccessful, one of the projects is unsuccessful for whatever reason, if it's deemed too risky, if it's deemed it doesn't really fit their desired outcomes, the province is open to working with the municipalities to either submit an additional project that hits the mark a little better, or working to adjust the existing application to achieve those outcomes. So I'm fairly confident that the province wants to work with us to ensure we're able to enjoy this money. I hope that answers the question.
I think it does. So the bottom line is, if they're telling us already ahead of time, we qualify for this much money, then they're going to do everything possible to make sure we get this much money. And I think that's what you just said.
Through the chair, that is correct. That is our general sense, and having participated in the webinars and FAQ sessions with the province, that has been, they're unable to explicitly say that, but that is something that was certainly inferred.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And then the other question I had was about the upgrades to council chambers for $335,000. For some reason, I thought when we looked at that originally, it was more than that. It was close to 500. And maybe I'm thinking of something else, but it was regarding council chambers. So
It was 500.
It was 500. So what did we cross off the list? Bring it down to 335.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I can respond to that question. You are correct, Councillor Bauer. The original project request that was put forward originally for the 2020 capital budget included both a replacement of the audiovisual technology and a complete replacement of the millwork and furniture in the room. It was intended to be a redesign of the space, and the additional cost above $335,000 was for furniture, millwork, and redesign of the space. Those components would not necessarily qualify for the grant, and so we've taken them out and focused solely on the electronic audiovisual components that would be in response to the COVID-19 crisis.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. Okay, great. That's it for me. Thank you, Chair.
Any further questions from council members? Councillor Crawford, then Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, thank you very much for this report. And nothing makes a councillor happy than free money. So that's great. And to get all this stuff done at the cost of somebody else is amazing. I just want to clarify. So the bridge, the trail connection that we talked about previously, that we were going to ask the developer to try to fix themselves, right? This is all now going to be paid under this fund. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that is correct. The intention is to get this project funded fully through this funding stream, but with recommendation 4, continue to engage in those conversations with any development opportunities that might come up in the future, so that if there are future opportunities to enhance the trail network in that area, that staff are open to doing so. But in the interim, using this available funding to fix the sort of safety hazard challenge that is present at that location.
So it's going to make this trail usable faster than we had anticipated, correct?
Through the chair, that is correct. All work would needs to be completed by the end of this year as a requirement of this grant. So it will be done as soon as possible.
I'm liking it. Thank you so much. Appreciate this very much.
Thank you, Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is regarding the wetland restoration of the northeast corner of Kingston and Salem Road. Isn't that where the Canadian Tire is right now?
Through the chair, I might defer this question to Director Romanowski because he has a better vision of where this location exactly is.
Okay.
Thank you, Cassandra. Through the chair to Councillor Khan. You're right. Northeast corner of Salem and Highway 2 is the Canadian Tire. But these are lands that are, let's just say, northeast quadrant of Salem and Highway 2. They're lands in the Carruthers Creek valleys adjacent to the Peacock racetrack and down through the lands, the Passvale lands. So they're dealing with those environmental lands east of Salem, north of Highway 2, between the racetrack and Salem Road. There's the creek is valley's quite wide through there, and that's where these works generally would be taking place.
Are we getting closer to the cemetery here? That's behind the Walmart?
Well, the cemetery's to the east of that plaza, but the cemetery lands are not within the valley lands.
Okay. All right. Okay, good. I have a better idea what you're talking about. No, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Romanowski. Thank you, Ms. Cruciano. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Any further questions on this before I ask a couple?
I do, Mr. Chair. It's Joanne, but I don't know.
There you go, Councillor Dice.
Frantically. Okay, thank you. And again, my question is about the wetland, also the restoration. So isn't that a part of the wetland that does tend to flood where the trail is? I don't know if staff can answer that.
Yeah, I'm not sure who to direct that to. Mr. Romanowski?
Yep, through the chair to regional councillor. Oh, go ahead, Dave.
Dave's
Yeah,
there.
sorry, I was just going to mention there is an area in that vicinity that does flood. That's predominantly related to beaver dams, right? We've got it's a very active community of beavers, and it's typically those beaver dams that are causing the flooding in that situation. So yeah, the restoration is not related to the flooding issue. It's more
Okay.
of a beaver issue.
Time for relocation. Okay. So the other question then is this money, like how much has TRCA or anybody given us an idea of how much the cost of the restoration in this wetland area would be? So is it larger than the 500 and the region is giving, and maybe a partnership is what is needed to, get it completed?
Just through the chair, I can perhaps speak to that. So the TRC has provided a budget. The budget that we've between ourselves and with our $250,000 and the region's $500,000. My understanding, and if Director Romaneski wants to jump in, please feel free. But my understanding is this is a very substantial undertaking that would take place in that wetland. That you can do some restoration work for something like $25,000, but combined between us and the region, it's about $750,000. I think my understanding is the original project estimate was around $1 million, and for that balance of the $250,000, staff are looking at exploring further partnership opportunities with Ducks Unlimited. That's a provincial organization that has received some funding related to flood mitigation work in watershed restoration, or wetland restoration. So with that, staff are continuing to explore that avenue, but are planning to work with the TRCA within the confines of that $750,000 budget shared between us and the region.
Thank you. And that's what I gathered, because it is a large piece of wetland there. And I know that, doing any kind of enhancements is costly, and it's never simple. So yeah, that helps. Thank you very much.
Any other member of council with questions on the report? Okay, hearing and seeing none. I just have a couple, and you guys have asked most of my questions, which is sometimes the reverse how it usually goes. So that's good. I thought, Ms. Cruciano, I thought that when I was originally told that this project that we deferred was covered, I thought we'd already been approved for that grant funding. I didn't realize we still had to go through the process, and it was a probably, but not firm yes.
Through the chair, that is correct. We do need to submit an application, which is due by 5 p.m. tomorrow. So the staff have been preparing the application for submission, but at this point in time, we do not have a firm yes from the province or the federal government at this point.
Okay, because part of the reason for deferring this one item in the first place was the fact that that area does have or will have a development application on it probably in the near future, and it's an opportunity to look at diverting the trail through a different area, not necessarily at the developer's expense, but through the site plan process. So if we perhaps are not successful in our grant application, this resolution that's in front of us today is still asking for us to make that award to the TRCA that we had deferred back in December. I don't really want to award a contract on something that we may or may not get the funding for when we just decided to defer it on December 14th, less than a month ago. Can you speak to that? Like, what are the odds on this? Because if we find out after the fact we don't get this, I'm not going to be very happy about it.
Through the chair, I'm fairly confident that this is a turnkey project with a lot of the work that's been completed, and through a close examination of the program guidelines and the application, that this would be that this is a project with a high probability of success. That the recommendation number 4 does continue to look at the long-term opportunities, but this would be the staff's recommendation at this time, and perhaps Director Meredith can speak further to this, but the urgency and the safety hazards related to this were also one of the rationale for why staff have noted this as a priority specifically for this grant program, and to move forward as soon as possible.
Okay, Mr. Meredith, do you have anything to add? I understand the project, and we understood the project on December 14th. when we debated it fairly heavily and made the decision to defer it, because we made the decision that it wasn't a immediate need to spend the money. Now, if we get the grant money, great, let's go ahead. But that hasn't changed the fact that our capital budget is fairly challenged right now, especially with the closure of Ajax Downs. And we need to really be looking at these high priority projects. So I don't know, Dave, can you add something to that? Because I'd be more inclined to potentially amend this to say, if the grant is successful, we award the tender, rather than just say we award the tender.
Yeah, and I would, understanding sort of council's previous position on that, I would tend to agree. I would say from a staff standpoint, we were gonna, in all likelihood, not advance this project until we had confirmed funding for this project anyway. So if, from my standpoint, if council was to say, should, sort of funding be provided or the application be approved to support this project, that it then be proceeded on this basis. So I understand council's intent sort of from the December 14th meeting and sort of the recommendation that is before you today. But like I said, it would be my thought that we would want that confirmation that the project was approved before we proceed.
Okay, thank you for that. And Ms. Cristiano, when will we know from the province whether our applications are successful or not?
Through the chair, they have not provided a specific date. However, we did receive some information that the applications are reviewed as received, and so once received tomorrow, we're anticipating within 6 weeks. 6 to 8 weeks will be the turnaround time. It would be shorter, but the province does have to nominate it to assess it themselves and then nominate it to the federal government for the final rubber stamp. So we are likely looking at early to mid-March before a final decision is received. I'd be thrilled if it was earlier, but at this point in time, that's the safest estimate that we'd be comfortable providing.
Okay, well, if the deadline's January 7th, I gotta assume that most municipalities are probably gonna submit it on January the 7th or close to that. So I'm guessing they'll have a pile to go through. I'd also had questions regarding the reduced number for the AV equipment in the council chambers and the Canadian Tire, because I too was trying to figure out where that wetland was. But those questions have been answered. Thank you very much. Does any member of council have anything further? Councilor Crawford?
Sorry, just one other question. Are we confident if we get the funding for the trail, are we confident of the dollar figure for fixing the trail? Because the other thing that typically happens is there's overages. So are we confident that we're estimating the repair of this trail at 103 and that we're not going to have to come back and say, oh, we need another 50,000 or whatever?
Through the chair, and Director Meredith can supplement this, but my understanding is that the project cost is about 103,000, but staff are requesting 123,000 from the grant, which is inclusive of about a 20% contingency to avoid something like that from happening.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, anything further before we go to the resolution?
I just have one more question. Sorry.
Councilor Dias, go ahead.
Just to Ms. Cruciano, again, with the repair of the Transcanada trail there on Church Street, doesn't that give it more weight, the fact that it is part of that Transcanada trail and that we do have a partnership with the TRCA on it?
Through the chair, yes, that would be one of the reasons that would make it an even stronger favorable project for selection. Based on the existing relationship with the TRCA, its involvement thus far, and the fact that it is, as you mentioned, part of the Transcanada Trail.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anything further? Okay, we have the report on the floor, moved by Councillor Lee, second by Councillor Khan. Does anybody wish to speak to? I have an amendment that I'd like to make, but does anybody have anything they wish to speak to before I make that amendment? No? Okay, I'll turn the chair over to Councillor Dias. I just want to make an amendment to item 2, and I'll use the exact wording that is in item 3. where it says that if the town is successful in its application, so where it says at the top of 2, that council award, to insert before council what has been highlighted, that if the town is successful in its application for the ICIP COVID infrastructure grant, that council award the contract for the detailed design and repair of the Transcanada Trail. That makes it the same, that active clause. Sorry, I need a seconder before I go ahead.
That's my job. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Crawford, you're the only one I can see.
Thank you. I'll just speak to it very quickly. Just for consistency, again, we are reconsidering a decision that was already made by council based on information. But if that information doesn't come through, I think we should stick with the original decision. So that active clause just makes that, if we get the free money, great, let's go ahead. If we don't, then, where we stood in December 14th stands. And I'd ask for your support. Thank you.
Anybody have any questions? Speak up because I can't see all of you. Okay, all in favor? And you'll have to tell me who. I can only see Marilyn and Sean.
Yes.
In favor.
Yes, in
yes.
favor.
Ash?
Ash in favor.
Okay, it's carried. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Now, is there anything further on the main motion as amended? No, hearing none. Those in favor of the main motion as amended?
Aye.
Hands up. I can see them. I see all hands. That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Cruciano and CO Baker for that report. Confirming bylaw moved by Councillor Khan, second by Councillor Dies, that bylaw number 1-2021 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Ajax at its special meeting held on January 6, 2021 be read a first, second, third time and passed. Those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, that's carried. And finally, moved by Councillor Crawford, second by Councillor Bauer, that the January 6, 2021 special meeting of the Council of the Town of Ajax be adjourned. Those in favor?
Aye.
I see all hands. That is carried. Thank you, everybody.